down. While the image of God is constantly clouded by a mirage of fog. And listen, I believe what the Bible said is true. Not one, not two, but 5 of the virgins were unprepared. Doesn't that make you scared? When I think about the life that I've led, I remember how he said, "Let not your heart be troubled." Church, let me tell you, right now, my faith is doubled. See, I realized that the prodigal son returned home after his sinful happenings. Well, our fathers prepared us a mansion. So how can we be sad then? If only we would rectify our resilience. We would worship in his brilliance. We'd be preaching out to the millions. Church, I've got to share my feelings. It feels good when you can edify God with your talents. You put God first. That's how it works. I realized I didn't introduce myself. My name is Andrew Bamusi, but most people know me as Ace. It's a nickname I was given as a kid, but you might have heard Steve call me Ace, so just so you know. You can pick or choose. Andrew, Ace. I'll respond to either. They say Ace. I was born in a small country called Malawi in Southeast Africa, but at the age of 2. Malawian? Muli Bonji. Zing. We'll talk after. Okay, amazing. That's where I was born, but at the age of 2 years old, my family moved me and my younger brother to Scotland, where I've spent the past, how old am I now? 19 years in Glasgow, Scotland. So I might not look it, I might not sound it, but that's home away from home inside anyway. And as you can tell, I'm a poet. Or at least I like to play with words in order to tell a story. A little bit more about myself. I'm the kind of person, when I want to read a book, I write one. And I know whenever I look through the pages, I'll find some. Of my memories contain the keys to our future. No losing sight of this dream. Like Martin Luther, kings and queens is what we were born to be. Our destiny is to be free, and we believe that no weapon formed shall prosper. The gospel message in our lives is what I put in these rhymes. Like Daniel, I pray 3 times for the lions. I said, I pray 3 times for the liars and snakes that defy us, but they're never going to divide us. See, Holy Zion is before us, but time is against us. All these systems to oppress us have made us feel defenseless. But there's power in our people. That's not forbidden knowledge. It's like I'm trying to fight the evil and still make time for college. We're just some musical youths with good vibrations trying to send messages out to this generation. No confrontation or expectation could faze how amazing our people's foundation is. There's no debating, there's no persuading us to take the wrong path when we know how close Satan is. I hope you listen as I'm saying this. We've been too real to be faking this. The world out there has got our little babies singing Molly Percocets. That's why there's so many clowns and just not enough circuses. See, having faith is like taking a leap before you've built your wings. But nonetheless, I believe we'll soar higher than the pilots. Because we pack heat, but preach nonviolence. We are the chosen generations, present within the silence. I realize I'm being translated, and maybe I should have went through this. So I hope the message is still getting along. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. If you need me to repeat or clarify anything, that's good. But I appreciate that. Hopefully everyone is getting the message. As I said, my family moved here in the year 2000. I was 2 years old. Both Adventists. So I grew up an Adventist in the Glasgow Seventh-day Adventist Church. But I didn't remain that way for a very long time. Brother Stephen mentioned this morning the characteristics of what it means to be a clay jar, a jar of clay. Some of us are chipped, scratched, handles came off, put back together and broken down again. And my story isn't too unlike that one. You see, I'm the firstborn in my family, the firstborn of a firstborn of a firstborn. And, where I come from, that can be seen as quite a special, important thing. It comes with a bit of expectations, a lot of responsibility. Although I have one younger brother, I have many younger cousins. And in our culture, your aunties are your mothers, your uncles are your fathers. So those are my brothers and sisters. So I'm the firstborn of many brothers and sisters. So growing up, I had that expectation. Like I said, I was a little good with words. I was good in school. I knew my maths, my English. So there was an academic side to all of it as well. And in church, I was kind of raised to be, this is the one who's going to lead our youth to be the next generation of pastors. And is going to, it's all well and fun, but as a human being, that can be quite a lot. I was still trying to find my own relationship with God, not just what I had inherited from my parents or from what the preacher was telling me. And around my teenage years, that kind of expressed itself in what we call the rebellious phase. Around chapter 18 of my life, I say chapter because I see it like a book. It just helps me remember. I was 18 years old. I left home for the first time, and I went to study in Edinburgh, which is, you've probably heard of Edinburgh if you know Scotland. It's away from where I was, though. And I was doing a degree that I wasn't really passionate about, biology. Again, I was very good at it, and my parents would love to see their son do that, and I hadn't really decided what I wanted to do, so I said, okay, if this is what they want, why not? But you can only go so far carrying somebody else's will. And unless I could develop my passion for myself, it wasn't going to get me nowhere. And with all the other pressure and expectation I had, being away from home for the first time, I eventually developed a certain mindset, being around certain people, going to certain places that maybe I shouldn't have been going to. I was misusing certain drugs, alcohol. Again, I can't go through everything in such a short time, but hopefully you get the idea of what I'm telling you here. I became broken. I didn't know what my future was. I didn't know what I wanted. Whether it was good, whether it was bad, when it comes to life, you just have to live. Sometimes leaving what you found is for the best. I was asking, if heaven's on the ground, then where's the rest? Because, see, I hadn't had a rest in many years. Trying to keep up with all the pressure from my peers. Busted brains drip from my ears. Medulla oblongata, cold jelly. No tears fall down from my face anymore. This place called home isn't safe anymore. It took all that I had. I couldn't take anymore. I wasn't the same as before. I was so afraid of the doors being slammed. I tried to hold them all open, but my fingers got jammed. Opportunities lost, so I reached for the windows, but I slipped on the floor, and the walls were closing in, and I felt the ceiling might fall. A lot of promises were made, and promises were broken. Picked up the cigarette, breathed slow, and then I smoked it. My little brother never understood why I was a smoker. I pray he never understands. And the smoke it never holds him, and then it ropes him, ties a noose around his neck, and then it chokes him. They said I'm meant to be woke. Maybe I'm broken. All the hurt that happened to me, I guess I provoked it. You see, I'm weak, and I know the devil knows it. But still, I'll look him in the eye because I am chosen by a bigger, higher power, and my soul is His. He'll never let me go, no frozen. Still, I've got a little bit of hope, and that hope is this little light of mine that resides inside soul, body, and mind. While I've still got life, I've got to rise. I had to rise, because although I was a chipped, broken, and battered clay jar, I still had a treasure within me. I still had a light. But as you may have experienced in your own lives, a lot of the time that's actually easier said than done. And one of the first steps to recovery, I believe they say, is self-acknowledgement. It's even harder to actually look at your own reflection and look yourself in the eyes and look at yourself for what you are. To acknowledge your shortcomings, your weaknesses, your temptations, addictions, conflictions, afflictions. See, you've got to know yourself. Know yourself. You've got to show yourself, control yourself. That's how you mold yourself, because you told yourself you're going to grow yourself. Self-reflection. That's no more second guessing, no more stressing. I learned my lesson. I knew my intentions. But that tension was kind of pressing, slowly depressing my mind, but I still acted like I was counting my blessings. But how can you act right on the outside when you're outright done with pretending? I thought the world was ending, Pastor. What about all the confessing? How do we show our true colors like popping confetti? The burden is heavy. Do you know when you're ready? Do you know your core values and personal mission? How do you share a message to a world that just won't listen? I know I'm a human being, attracted to all that glistens. But admitting is the first step to taking that first breath that you don't feel like you owe to anybody else. You don't even owe it to gaining any wealth. I realized I had to take control of my health. I had to learn to love myself. Before you can love others, you must learn to love yourself. And only Jesus is the example of love that we have to adopt. By the time I didn't realize that, I was in a relationship when all of this was going on with a really good girl who just hadn't had the best experiences in life. We were just like two broken puzzle pieces that somehow managed to squeeze together, and we kind of made do with that. We're no longer together, unfortunately, but I remember one of our darkest periods when we were both going through very heavy things with our families. She sat me down and she asked me, why don't we take our masks off? Unravel. Do we talk or do we babble? On and on like Babylon. Deception rules. The mask is on. See, we sing our songs of happiness, but sometimes we don't admit how bad it is. This mask disguising tragic mess for fear of being consumed by loneliness. Because our friends respect the mask. So we hold back when they ask what we carry in our bags. And I'm not talking about a physical bag, but the spiritual bag that holds addiction, confliction, and the pain we have. See, as long as no one knows what I'm doing, I can just act like I'm improving. Put on the mask and keep on moving. But I know that God knows I'm losing. She told me, why don't we take our masks off? Unravel. Be honest with those with whom we travel. Get right to the point like a javel, intentionally admit to the sin that we're living in. I've learned a lot from that point. I'm 21 years old now, in case I didn't mention that. I'm currently a student at Newbold, also studying theology with Brother Stephen here. None of that happened overnight. And again, I wish I could go into details, but I'm trying to summarize as much as I can here. Learning how to be vulnerable was one of the greatest things God taught me. How to come to Him, not wearing my nice clothes, fancy scarf or anything, but as a naked, vulnerable and frail human being. His child. To my Father, I had to open up. I had to bear all my wounds, all my shortcomings. I had to admit to all my weaknesses. The scars that had been placed on me through growing up. I mentioned I came to Glasgow, to Scotland, with both my parents, but about 9 years ago, they separated. My father moved down to Hull. I didn't see him a lot, but this was a time when, I was entering teenagehood. And it's only now I realize how important it was to have a father during that very turbulent time in a young man's life. I didn't appreciate that back then. I thought freedom, no more authority. This guy who wants me to live life the way he wants it and was always, as I felt, oppressing me. And now he was gone and I didn't realize these things. So I grew up with just my mother, having to adopt a position of what I felt like was the father of the house. Raising my brother, raising my younger siblings who also went through similar situations. I was the big brother to all of them. I had to become a man. And I remember during this time, my mother's father passed away. My grandfather passed away. I tried to ease her pain. I said it's God's will. And she said she felt the same. But I still had all these questions buzzing in my brain. If it wasn't for her prayers, I'd probably go insane. I spent time on these rhymes. I hope you listen to them. With a message so divine and ambition to them. Like I said, I've cried so much, I just can't cry anymore. So if you feel how I feel, can I rhyme some more? How can the devil take my brother if he's close to me? I swear he's everything I'm not, but I hope to be. I get a little honest and I ask myself, when the time comes, who's going to save me if I ask for help? I took my soul on a journey to the furthest coast, trying to make change as I was taking notes. And I asked Jesus why, because I need to know. You died when we had such a long way to go. I tend to lock all my problems in a box I'm trying to leave behind. Buried under hidden shores nobody can find. Because too often it gets full and I can't close the lid. So I take it out on family, my closest friends. It's like a puzzle in my head. I'm just trying to piece it right. It's like I'm so close to heaven, hell, I just need some time. I didn't mention, before all this, I was a rapper. You could say I was local famous or wherever in Scotland. I was good at what I did. Popular. Money was coming in from shows and all of that. But none of it really made me happy. None of it satisfied me. I used to imagine if doors closed at all of my shows. All because people wanted to hear songs about what? Drugs and those fancy clothes, foreign gods, golden calves. The pagans laughed. But now I do this for the love, so it's free of charge. Most people never give interest, so I'm overdraft. This is surely art. In my grandmother's household, this was surely taught. And I'm trying not to be naive, but these times are hard. In the midst of all this glamour, I just pray you find God. We never asked to be the burden bearers, but souls need saving, and it's now or never. Hell on earth, that's all I see. Sometimes it's like it's us against them, and it's just you and me. So listen to the words I say in these songs. And forgive me if I ever steer you wrong, because I'm also trying to read the signs, but my vision's blurry. I just know that if it doesn't touch my soul, then it's not made for me. You know, the radio don't play the songs I used to love. Maybe I'm just growing up. I might never be a Hollywood star on a red rug. To see the star I want to be, you have to look above to the heavens. Vulnerability. I've done a lot of talking, so hopefully now we can talk to each other, get a little involved. It wouldn't be right for me to come up here and not share a scripture with you. If you have a Bible or a holy device, if you could find the same book we read from earlier today, 2 Corinthians, a little further on though in the journey of Paul, chapter 12. 2 Corinthians, my apologies. The reason I went through all that just there is I believe before you can present something, you need to know the context. And so hopefully you know a little bit about my context, so you can catch on to where we're going here. Chapter 12, verses, let's go for verse 9 and 10. Anyone, if you feel moved to read that, please do share. Amen. Thank you, Stephen. Before I continue, I want you to take a moment after reading this. I want you to think about a time when you felt weak, a time where you were broken. Just think about that for a second. Maybe it's many times, plural. Maybe it's a time you saw somebody else weak and broken and that had an effect on you. I'll give you a minute. I'm talking about context here. This is your context. Because whatever moment comes to your mind now affects how you read this verse. You realize? Wherever your personal weaknesses are, your infirmities, will change how this verse applies to your life. I'm talking about vulnerability. In order to be a true believer of Christ, we are asked to be vulnerable. There are many people, though, who find this idea of being vulnerable uncomfortable. Can you relate? I can. Being vulnerable calls you to expose yourself. Maybe to expose yourself to criticism. Expose yourself to be embarrassed. Exposing yourself to danger and being hurt. And I know I don't like any of those things, at least not in high quantities. But in order to live out our faith, vulnerability is, to some extent, it has to be given. When we love people the way Jesus Christ loved, we open ourselves up to having that love rejected by the people around us, especially by our enemies. And when we forgive time and time and time again, 70 times 7 times how many, we expose ourselves to being taken for granted. I'm talking about vulnerability. How many of you can say that you have experienced or are experiencing a relationship that was worthwhile? Oh, that hurt. No, oh, wow. I pray for love. I pray for mercy. You don't have to say it out loud, but think about it. What were some of the key things you experienced while inside that relationship, or are still experiencing, or hoping to experience? Do share. I'm my mouth's dry. I'm talking a lot. I need some feedback. What makes a relationship, not just a romantic one, maybe with your family, with a colleague, what makes it worthwhile being called a relationship? Communication. I like this. Communication. Help in difficult situations. Thank you for sharing. We're talking about vulnerability here. You mentioned honesty. That's definitely one I'd put up there. How about humility? Compassion. Emotional availability. While our vulnerability isn't there for us to be taken advantage of, when we open our hearts to others and are completely honest with them and make ourselves available, I think that's when we experience the fullness of a true, loving relationship. And in a similar way, this is exactly how it works with God. Everything you mentioned, communication to availability, the way we choose to interact with Him and how open we are with Him affects our understanding. But this is a crucial part of getting close to Him. It can be scary. I think it's definitely quite terrifying when you have to admit to things that would usually leave you quite open. You see me up there doing what I do, but I got to admit, I still get nervous every single time I do it. I just find ways of coping with it. See, to me, this isn't just a performance. I'm sharing a piece of myself with you. And that's not something can say I was able to do 5 years ago, maybe even 1 year ago. We're talking about vulnerability. It can be terrifying. knowing that you can be rejected, people can disagree, people might not relate to what you're saying. You feel like an outsider, like you're the only person in the world going through what you're going. But that's not how it is with God. The way God does things is not the way us human beings do things, especially when it comes to this word relationship. When it comes to God, we don't have to worry about being rejected when we open our hearts to Him. He offers a refuge from the feeling that we have to put up barriers and walls. He breaks those things down, and He builds the bridge to connect to our hearts, only if we are willing. And if we are willing, He welcomes us with open arms. Being forgiving and loving can leave us exposed to hurt. But these are two things that we have to do continuously in order to show people the true love of God. The verse we read, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, the two verses 9 and 10. Who knows the context of this? As I mentioned, context is important. It's very easy to just take a verse and get a nice message of it, say amen, and leave. But we need to know why this was said, who it was said to, and who said it. All right, who said it? I may have mentioned it earlier. Paul. Right, Paul. Who did he say it to? Mm-hmm. In terms of the whole book itself, perhaps, we know that 2 Corinthians is a letter, right? A letter sent to the church in the Corinthians. Yeah, easy questions. Let's put the pieces together. And usually when somebody writes a letter, it can be very personal. So he goes into detail about a personal experience he had that brought him to the point of understanding what it means to boast in his weaknesses. I won't take too long on this, but let's go to the same chapter, the first verse. Again, if anyone would like to read, has everyone got a Bible? Is it okay if we do a verse each? Just to get everyone involved and make sure we're all in the same place. I'll start. Chapter 12, verse 1. It is not expedient for me, doubtless, to glory. I will come to visions and revelations of the Lord.
Now a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. But it was in the body, or out of the body, I do not know. God knows.
Okay, let's pause there for a second. What did he just say there? He said it quite a lot. He knows a person in Christ who 14 years ago was what? Caught up to the third heaven. Whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. Okay. What is going on here? A vision. Oh, you said Paul. But Paul's the one who's writing this letter. And he said, I knew a person in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to heaven, maybe had this vision. Why do you say it's Paul? I think you know the answer. Yeah. Let's take it step by step. Just wanted to highlight that. Verse 3, if anyone would like to read. 4. Okay, so we heard that Paul is talking about somebody who had a vision. He had an experience with God. And from the context, we can now confirm that Paul is actually talking about himself. But why did he choose not to describe it as himself? Why the mystery? The anonymity? Humility. I think the last verse we read there was that verse 6. Somebody read that one more time. Mm-hmm.
For if I should desire to glory, I shall not be foolish, for I shall speak the truth, but I forbear, lest any man should account of me above that which he seeth me to be, or heareth me of the prophet.
Paul said it himself there. Your version says glory. Other versions talk about boasting. We know what it means to boast? Oh, we do. Okay. Maybe we are Adventists in here, amen? He says, I would not desire to glory. It is not his intention to boast. He had this amazing experience where in the vision, what he witnessed, he can't even utter. It's not even for human beings to maybe comprehend or to try and imagine, although we might try to do that exact thing. If you had something like that, what would be the first thing you would do? You've just seen the glory of he said the third heaven. I didn't even know we were doing three heavens. But he says this happened 14 years ago. And only now he's deciding to tell this. He decided not to boast, not to give glory to that one spectacular moment, but rather, he says, lest any man should think of me above that which they see me to do or they hear me to do. How do you... Yes, of course.
He
14 years before this, it does, if I'm not mistaken, 2 Corinthians, this is around, I know we're getting into numbers, 56 AD. 14 years before that, it's like 42. Wait. Other way around. 42 AD to 56 AD. And at that time, I believe Paul was back in Tarsus ministering in Syria. And those are good questions. And I actually wish I could give you an answer, but actually thank you for that question. That's a question I actually have myself. Maybe I should have prepared in advance. But we will look into that. Thank you for that question. I won't answer now, but I will look into it. Yeah, okay. Oh, I think that's my invitation. Okay, thank you. Okay, as I was saying, he chooses instead for people to know him, not for that one moment, but for what they see him do and for what they hear him say. Not for what was a moment, but for what he is continuously doing. Now, although we're talking about vulnerability and times where we're weak, we also have times where we experience glory, right? Where we have that experience with God, that wow, this is real. This just happened. Yeah, that's a good word. You're feeding me today. Thank you. For some, it's maybe your baptism. It's the wow moment. Maybe it's the first time you were taken into a church. Maybe it was when you met somebody who just was so full of God, it was just a wow moment. And a lot of the times it's very easy to get caught up in that moment. The paradise moment. But here Paul is saying that it's not just about the singular, that singularity. Your relationship with God is much more than that moment, but something that is carried on over time, over maybe a period of 14 years. It's what you continue to do after that moment, what the people see you do, and what they hear you say. These are the things he would rather people notice than to boast and have glory in that. But it doesn't end there. It was mentioned earlier, but for what verse were we on? 7. Yes, this is it. If somebody could read 7. Something happens here. Right. To keep him from becoming conceited. We know what conceited means, or elated. What's the meaning of that word? Somebody would say gassed, filled with air, big-headed, cocky, proud, confident. In order to prevent that from happening, what happened to him? A pain. Something happened. He was humbled. Something brought him back down to earth. And we don't exactly know. The text doesn't tell us what exactly this thorn is. He describes it as a messenger of Satan to torment him, to keep him from being elated. And when this thing happened, what did he decide to do? The next verse gives you a little clue. Lord, what is this? I just had an amazing experience with you. I want to go ahead and shout it, tell it over the mountain. Now I have this pain. This thing just is preventing me from doing what I want to do. How many times did he appeal to the Lord? 3 times. Over and over, he cried to God, take this pain from me. But what was God's answer to him? The verse we know all too well. Verse 9. God replied to him, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. Let me stop right there. Power is made perfect in weakness. Now, if you were to go outside the Bible, does this sentence even make sense? What is the meaning of power? Some say strength. What does power mean to you? The ability to do everything. And on the other side, you have weakness. Can't do anything. But here the Bible is giving us what to human mind should seem like an impossible concept. God tells him, my power is made perfect in weakness. All that strength, the confidence that Paul had, has been afflicted, and he feels like maybe I can't continue to do what I wanted to do, to spread the good news, to go here, and to write these letters. How can I do this, God, if you don't take this pain away from me, this thorn, this affliction, this confliction, this depression, this oppression, this thing that is holding me down? I can't continue to go, Lord, if you don't take this thing out of me. 3 times I've prayed, but still it is here. Lord, why won't you take this away from me? Because his power is made perfect in weakness. I could repeat that over and over and over. Of course. There are many examples we could give. Do share. The thing that was. What they had to do, they had to look at it. Earlier on, we talked about what? Self-acknowledgement. Sometimes you actually have to look at the thing that's looking you right in the eyes. And that is not an easy thing to do. The thing that is causing the most trauma, the most pain. And you're praying to God over and over and over, God, take this away from me. And he might ask you to look that thing right in the eye and acknowledge that that is what it is. And I might not take it away from you, but my grace is sufficient. That's our God. That's my God. He said. Maybe that'll come to you tomorrow. It's okay. I'm feeling that right now. And what was Paul's response when God gave him these words? In the same verse. Paul takes it, he said, okay. I understand what this means now. I see what you're saying, God. King James Version says, he says, most gladly, therefore, I will rather glory in my infirmities. I think I have another version here. I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses. He's going to look at that thorn in his side. And this is what he's going to show. We read the context. We already know the many things that have happened to him so far. But he says, forget all that. Look at this right here. Look at this wound, this thorn. Look at this pain. Look at it the way I've had to look at it. This is my God. Even with this, I can do everything you mentioned earlier. I am powerful, even though I am weak. Human beings, we're so fragile, you know? So easily broken. I think it's important I read the next verse. I wanted to move on, but verse 10. I'll finish on verse 10. Therefore, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities for the sake of Christ. For whenever I am weak, then I am strong, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Do you know what he said there? He said, I am a cracked, chipped, scratched, broken jar of clay. But the power of Christ dwells within me. The treasure dwells within me. That is his strength. That's his power. And that's his weakness. I asked you earlier to think about a time when you were weak, when you were broken, when you were forced to become vulnerable. In that time, maybe it's easier to see now that you can look back on it, or maybe it's something you're still going through. Did you manage to see how Jesus' grace was sufficient for you? Did you see his power made complete in your weakness? Maybe that's something you're still looking for. I look back at my own journey. Let me put it that way. And I know for a long time I didn't realize that. I thought I had to be the everything man. I couldn't show my weaknesses. I had too many people depending on me. There was just too much to lose. If I shed tears, what would the people who were crying think? I had to be some kind of superhero in front of the church, in front of the family, in front of all my peers in class. I had to put on the mask. But that didn't get me anywhere. I had to realize that this wasn't about me. It wasn't about the great things I've done or the great things I will do in the future. It was about what I'm not. I'm at a point where what used to be, God, look at how good I'm doing, look at how good I'm living, is now, wow. Look at how many times I've been forgiven. That's our God. His power is being made perfect in my weakness. And for that is the reason I'm standing here. That is the reason I can do what I do. It's not because I'm a great speaker. It's not because I was, I consider myself an introvert. You might not see that right now, but I literally, my palms get sweaty. I get dry mouth. Just before I came up here, I feel like I want to just run away and just cancel this. Like, Steve, you know what? It's okay. You did good in the morning. Let's send these people home. My leg is shaking as I'm saying this right now. But his strength is made perfect in my weakness. And for that, I can, all the more gladly, I will be vulnerable. I will expose myself. And you know what? I might get hurt, but so what? I'll take that thorn to the side for something bigger, for something greater. You might still be going through your weakness. And that's something between you and God, but make sure you tell it to him. Make sure you look at it for what it is and you just let him fill your jar. Acknowledge that you are just a microwavable container. And without that thing inside you, that might just be all you will ever be. Thank you for listening. We finish with a prayer, perhaps? Or do join me in prayer. Dear God, amazing, almighty, everlasting. For a man of words, I'm actually speechless. I don't have the words to even justify what kind of God you are. God, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity for us to gather here today. New faces and familiar faces, but still as one family together. To worship, to share, to be vulnerable and open, all for the sake of letting you in. I want to thank you for the life you've put in our lungs, Lord. Throughout the week, we may have seen things, said things, done things, heard things that really weren't quite pleasing to you. But now you're asking us to acknowledge that, to stare it in the face, to confront it, not because we are strong or powerful or that we can do it ourselves, but because you want us to acknowledge that only you can save us. Only you can clear us of our dirt. I want to thank you for prayer, for the chance to talk to you, to grow and have a stronger communication with you. And I know you're listening. I've seen it. And I hope that you show that to other people who are maybe still waiting waiting for a reply, who have seen the thorn in their sides and are crying out over and over in agony, Lord, take this away from me. Lord, show them something bigger than the removal of pain. Show them your strength in weakness. Lord, continue to restore our souls and lead us on paths of righteousness for your name's sake. Thank you for your love. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, I can only pray this. Amen.
We'll just close again with how great is our God. I think that's all you can really say after hearing that. So, yeah.
If you wouldn't mind standing and joining us once more.
Splendor of a king, clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice, all the earth rejoice. He vests himself in light, and darkness tries to hide. Trembles at his voice, trembles at his voice. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. To age he stands, and time is in his hands. Beginning and the end, beginning and the end. The Godhead three in one, Father, Spirit, Son, the Lion and the Lamb, the Lion and the Lamb. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. Name above all names, worthy of all praise. My heart will sing, how great is our God. You're the name above all names. You are worthy of all praise. And my heart will sing, how great is our God. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God.